there's a lot of concern that when these scores come out, most kids are going to do very poorly, and that's going to be unfortunate. But you're saying that there's going to be an adjustment?
Well, what I'm saying is that part of the reason that we're doing the field test this year is so that we have the data so that we can say this score on our old test called the Oaks is comparable to about this score on our new test called Smarter Balance, so that we can say to parents and teachers and schools, your children are doing about the same, but the scale looks different. And especially because in Oregon right now, our graduates need to demonstrate essential skills in 3 areas. They need to demonstrate a certain level of skill and knowledge in 3 areas: reading, writing, and math. And on our current test, they need to score what's called a 236 in order to have demonstrated that level of knowledge and skill. And so the scale for this new assessment will be different, but they still need to meet the comparable of a 236. We're not going to make the graduation standard higher because we have a new test. The graduation standard, the demonstration of knowledge and skill standard, will be the same, but it will be set on a different scale. We need the results of this new assessment so we can set that scale appropriately.
Excuse me, just do you tuck that wire just behind your jacket?
Sure.
Perfect. And then also just fix your tie.
Tie. Thank you. I actually looked down at that part. There we go. Okay.
You got it. What is the Smarter Balance test? I mean, can you succinctly explain like what is that compared to, let's say, Oaks, an Oaks test?
Sure. Probably the thing that we have to do before we start talking about the test is talk about the standards. So in 2010, the Oregon State Board adopted new standards, and they're Oregon's state standards. They're also adopted by some other states across the nation, and they're called the Common Core. And they're just in English Language Arts and Math, just 2 subjects. And so these are a higher set of standards. They're more challenging, and the expectation is that students would know more and be able to do more on this new set of standards in those 2 subject areas. And they're set to what we call college and career readiness standards. In other words, if a student can demonstrate this set of standards, they should be ready for their next steps. So we've wanted to create this set of standards that ensures that students are ready for their next steps, and we didn't think that the old Oregon standards were doing that. I don't think they were. This new set of standards does. Well, once you have a new set of standards, this is what we want students to know, and this is what we want them to be able to demonstrate that they can do. Then you need to have an assessment that tells you if they're actually doing that or not. And so then we needed to have a new assessment to compare to the set of standards we wanted students to know. And so this new assessment is certainly more challenging because the content we want students to know is more challenging. And the Oaks test was just multiple choice. The one that we had developed in Oregon was just multiple choice. This new test is multiple choice, and then it's what we call short response, and then it's also extended response. So there's some multiple choice, then there's some short answer questions, and then there's some bigger questions like write an essay, and read this passage, write an essay about it, and back up what you're writing in the essay with knowledge or information that was contained in the essay you read. Or here's a math problem. Do it and explain why you did it that way. So that this test actually gets deeper at what students really know or don't know.
Isn't there a concern with some of that, with that Smarter Balance, that it's stacked where, let's say, one part is wrong in the front end, then the rest of it's all going to be wrong?
It really isn't, because this is a computer adaptive test. So when a student answers a question, if they get it right, the test makes the next question a little bit harder. And if they get that right, a little bit harder. And if they get that wrong, then a little bit easier. So it adapts the question a little bit so that we get a really good sense of what students know or don't know.
But in other words, if you're writing though about something, or you have an answer, it seems though, in other words, if you get the first part wrong, if you're explaining your reasoning and your answer was wrong, then it's all wrong.
Well, there actually are a couple different parts of that. One is that if you did the work and you got something wrong, yes, you're going to be marked down for that. But if you go back and there's lots of good reasoning that surrounds your answer, even though it's not correct, you can get some scoring for the work that you do to support your wrong answer, I suppose, if it's logical and it makes sense and it's well written. and well defined, yeah.
There's also a multimedia component to this, I understand?
Well, there is some multimedia, and most of that has to do with adaptations for students who might need them. So, for example, if I was a deaf and hard of hearing student, there's a component that you can click on so that there would be a video of a person signing to you some of the questions and that kind of thing, so that there's different components that go along that are adaptations for some students.
But I thought there were some parts where you would actually watch a video and then have questions to respond to?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
Okay, I mean,
Yeah.
you would know.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
On this.
It's possible, but I don't think so.
On this. You were quoted a while back saying you expect 65% of the kids not to pass this test. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. I think that. And when we say pass, there are sort of two different ways to think about this. In comparison to the old Oregon test, it'll be much. I mean, it would be much higher than that. It would be in the range that we currently have. But there's also a federal standard, if you will, or it's not federal, it's national. There's a standard that will be set in this assessment because multiple states have adopted the Common Core standards, and multiple states will also have students use the same test that we're going to use. And so for the first time, we'll actually be able to compare how well did our students do to students in other states. And the passing rate is a passing rate that would be at a college and career readiness standard. It's a higher standard than the old Oregon standard. And so the first time that students take it, there'll be, in our first year, we think that there'll be many fewer students who meet that standard. It doesn't mean that they got dumber, if you will, or that they know less. It just means that we're expecting them to meet a much higher standard than we had in the past.
Why give a test, though, a year from now when the expectation is most kids will not be able to do well on the test?
Right. So I would sort of flip the question and say, does it make sense for us to have a set of standards and have students take a test that doesn't have them be ready for their next steps? Right now in the state of Oregon, if we said to people, when students graduate from high school, how prepared are they to be successful in their next steps? If we asked the community colleges in Oregon that, they would say that if a student graduates and matriculates to a community college within 2 years, there's a 67% chance they'll take a remedial course. And if they take a remedial course in either writing or in math, there's a 50% chance that they'll ever earn any kind of a degree out of that community college. So if we've set a standard that really says this is what you need to do in order to be successful and that standard is too low, I think it's really wrong for us to continue down that pathway and say to students, hey, you're doing everything that you need to do to be successful and earn an Oregon diploma, but by the way, when you earn it, it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to go on to college without having to take a remedial course and be successful. And when we talk to employers, they tell us that you're not very well prepared to be successful in your job. And when we talk to the military, they say we're having to do all kinds of retraining. And so bottom line is our standard's too low. We need to set a standard that says this is what you need to do in order to be college and career ready. And if too few of you are passing it right now, we need to do a better job on the education front to make sure that you are prepared. Now, in other states where they've done this, the initial passing rates were fairly low. And within just a couple of years, they've seen 10, 15, 20% more students meet the standard. And so sometimes when you set a higher standard and say this is what you have to do, people will rise to that level of expectation. And I think that'll be the case here in Oregon. And if we don't do that, we know what we're going to get. And what we've been getting is not acceptable.